Welcome back from lunch, and I hope we all enjoyed the lunch, which was sponsored by HiJ Communications. Before lunch, we considered sub-items 8.1, and we'll now move to sub-item 8.2 on emerging safety issues. In this sub-item, we'll review working papers on identifying emerging issues that need to be addressed to manage safety. WP12 has already been presented by the Secretariat, which also addresses these issues. So I'll ask states and international organizations to present the other papers in the batch. I will now invite the EU to present working paper 46. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am pleased to present paper 46 on emerging issues on behalf of the European Union and its member states and the other member states of the European Civil Aviation Conference and Eurocontrol. The aviation system today is challenged with rapid developments in new technologies, new products, new operations, and new business models. We can expect significant technological, environmental, economic, and societal transformations in the coming years. The safety approach used so far was developed within a specific aviation environment, and today's aviation system must, however, be considered in a broader context of a connected world with open architectures and rapid change, as also highlighted by President Aliou in his address earlier this week. All risks need to be appropriately managed, including but not limited to finance, environment, safety and security risks, taking also into account the possible interdependencies between these aspects. We would like to call it integrated risk management, a distinct, multi-objective decision-making concept to balance the conclusions of specific risk management systems and in doing so provide us with holistic advice to achieve overall risk reduction. States and regions around the world are currently facing the same or similar challenges to these. The current ICAO instruments, however, are not sufficiently adapted to respond to this changing environment and to support innovation while ensuring and enhancing a safe and efficient aviation system. Based on input provided by states and regional organizations, ICAO may consider ensuring a monitoring function to collect intelligence, to identify emerging issues, and to carry out a preliminary assessment of any potential safety impacts. Within this monitoring function, ICAO could ensure collaboration between all stakeholders, including the industry. In addition to the aviation community, such collaboration should also involve representatives of the general public to broaden understanding and acceptance of new developments, as well as non-aviation governmental agencies in case of cross-cutting issues. In summary, ICAO could play an essential role in the development of a common approach for states to deal with emerging issues. Consequently, we would like to propose that the conference recommends that ICAO systematically collects information from states and regional organizations on new concepts of operations and on their initial implementation in order to assess and monitor their global safety impact. We propose to recommend that ICAO raises awareness and provides guidance to states regarding emerging risks, recommending mitigation actions relying on integrated management of distinct risks. Third, to establish a holistic and performance-based approach process to the development of ICAO provisions in response to these emerging issues and risks, including a periodic post-evaluation of the initial mitigations to assess if they achieve the objectives for which they were designed. Fourth, to provide guidance for the implementation of risk and performance-based assessment and oversight, both at state and regional level. And fifth, to provide an inclusive civil-military cooperation mechanism to move from a reactive situation to a proactive one and a predictive, holistic risk management towards the emerging issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, EU. I'll now invite Japan to present Working Paper 254. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to make a presentation for Working Paper 254 in behalf of Japan. Recently, suborbital vehicles aiming to provide commercial space flights are being developed rapidly. These vehicles are potentially capable of providing international flight, which may foster the growth of the aviation system if integrated successfully. However, there are legal challenges for these vehicles to actually fly around the world because of the ambiguity in international law or standards. For example, a suborbital vehicle, if the suborbital vehicle is treated as a space object, the launching state has total responsibility for damage caused in airspace, whereas if a suborbital vehicle is treated as an aircraft, the carrier basically has a limited liability for damage caused in airspace. In addition, there are operational challenges due to the differences in environment between airspace and outer space. For example, there are differences in temperature, air pressure, and radio waves, and so on. Since the suborbital vehicles are intended to fly internationally, and hopefully being integrated in a non-segregated airspace in the future, it seems that these operations hold an inherent safety concern to global civil aviation. And we think that it should be regulated by a unified rule. And in light of that, Japan supports the ICAO's establishment of the Space Learning Group, collaborating with the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOSA, to further study these issues. Moreover, Japan recognizes that stakeholders of air and space deepen their understanding by participating in ICAO UNOSA Aerospace Symposium, of which ICAO UNOSA took leadership to accommodate stakeholders in one location. As such, we recommend that the conference, A, recognize that rapid development of suborbital vehicles by the private sector, and B, recognize the need for a regulatory framework of suborbital operation, and C, request ICAO to develop, in cooperation with UNOSA, a roadmap to consider a regulatory framework of suborbital operation to inclusion in the Global Air Navigation Plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Japan. I'll now invite Venezuela to present Working Paper 154. This working paper is supported by the South American states. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. Venezuela, supported by the South American region states, is presenting this working paper. And certainly, unmanned aircraft systems has been covered in previous General Assemblies. And we note the efforts that have been made with various groups that have been set up since 2008. There was the study group on unmanned aircraft systems, and then there was the expert group on the RPAS, and then also a group on small unmanned aircraft in 2015. There have been positive results with the various guidance material being published. And we'd also like to recognise various efforts that have been made at an international level in various regions, such as the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems, JARIS, and also states that have a considerable volume of RPA operations. There are certain concerns which are dealt with in the Committee on USN non-segregated space. We have been developing our first standards with support, and there are nevertheless certain concerns that have come up when we look at some emerging aspects, according to us, which are related to maintenance activities such as mechatronics and also technological variants and the design of aircraft and the different methods and the different technology and different oversight. Then the question of the various registration aspects and the manufacturers of these types of unmanned aircraft. So we'd like ICAO to continue to promote this and deal with training needs and equip us with more specific information tools to be provided to the member states and the regions on the aforementioned aspects, and which are found in section 2 and also others that have been raised by regions and member states, which could constitute emerging hazards and cause safety risks. So we need to continue to identify the various variations and what's needed in each region when it comes to these unmanned aircraft operations, so that we can deal with these in a coordinated way with the ICAO regional offices. And we would like to also support the working paper 12 that was presented by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venezuela. I'll now invite South Africa to present working paper 294. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presenting working paper 294 on behalf of South Africa. This paper presents the need for ICAO to develop government safety inspector training program for the technical safety oversight personnel in all the ICAO USOP audit areas. South Africa acknowledges with appreciation the work done by ICAO in developing government safety training programs in the areas of airworthiness, personal licensing, and also flight ops. However, South Africa believes that this work should continue and that additional GIS training programs should be developed across all other ICAO USOP audit areas, such as ANS. South Africa believes that the development of such programs will help enhance the capacity, knowledge, and skills of safety oversight technical personnel within the state safety oversight system. The lack of a standardized safety oversight training programs has a negative impact on the ability of states to fulfill their safety oversight obligations as called for by the Convention. Mr. Chairman, South Africa acknowledges the existence of safety oversight-related training programs which are provided through the ICAO-recognized aviation training centers. However, South Africa is concerned that these training programs may not be standardized and also not comprehensive enough to provide safety oversight technical personnel with an in-depth knowledge and skills required to perform an effective safety oversight function on behalf of the states. Finally, Mr. Chairman, South Africa has noted that these training programs may also not be affordable for the least developing countries due to the high cost associated with them. And we believe that this is, this is contrary to the to the No Country Left Behind initiative. Mr. Chairman, the committee is invited to endorse the action as follows: that the conference is invited to request that ICAO prioritize the development of safety, of government safety inspector course across all ICAO USOP audit areas to enable a uniform and standardized training of safety oversight technical personnel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, South Africa. We now invite the International Council of Aircraft Owner and Pilot Associations, IOPA, to present working paper 194. IOPA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to all. It is my pleasure to introduce for consideration Working Paper 194, New Medical Standards for Light Aircraft Pilots, presented by the International Council of Aircraft Owner and Pilot Associations. This paper invites ICAO to develop a new medical standard for Annex 1 personal licensing that is designed to serve pilots of light aircraft flying for personal reasons. General aviation is a vital part of the global air transportation system. General aviation and general aviation airports have always been the entry point, training ground, personnel source for both general aviation and commercial operations and their attendant technical infrastructures. A healthy, vibrant, and diverse GA community is critical to confronting many of the challenges being addressed by the ICAO Next Generation of Aviation Professionals initiative. Unfortunately, in some location, medical certification for GA pilots has, over time, become overly burdensome, unnecessarily costly, and is thought to be a contributing factor in the decline of the pilot population worldwide. Realizing this, many nations have developed and currently recognize non-ICAO medical standards for the validation of licenses for pilots who fly only within their national airspace. In the United States alone, over 40,000 pilots are currently flying under Basic Med, one of the medical certification standards that have already been implemented. But these standards vary from nation to nation, and their review, analysis, and harmonization of these standards is a goal worthy of ICAO's consideration. Development of a new standard for light aircraft pilots will offer a safe, cost-effective, and data-driven approach to improve GA safety. Making flying more affordable through a new medical standard can serve as a catalyst to revive GA both through new and existing pilot participation, helping to reverse the downward trend. It's important to emphasize that the development of this new standard will not put additional requirements on states and, in fact, can reduce the regulatory costs for both the operator and the regulator. I thank the conference for your consideration and look forward to your support.
Thank you, IOPA. Before we can consider IOPA's paper, we need at least 2 states to support the paper. Yeah, it's okay. I have a number of states supporting. Thank you very much. So I'll now open the floor for questions, comments, and contributions. United States, you have the floor.
With regard to Working Paper 254 presented by our colleagues from Japan, the United States appreciates the interest in this new and emerging area of the space industry. We believe the current framework has served everyone well and hasn't presented any practical difficulties. At the present time, the United States sees national regulation focusing on safety of operations and deconfliction with other uses of airspace as the appropriate means of regulating this emerging industry. The United States recommends we continue to operate under the current framework until there is a demonstrated need and a basis for developing additional international rules. However, we do welcome the continued dialogue with our partners on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I'll invite Jordan to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Jordan like to share with South Africa the need for standard training materials covering all the ICAO USAP audit areas as presented in Working Paper 294. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Finland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finland supports the Working Paper 46 and its recommendations. In particular, we would like ICAO to establish a holistic and performance-based process for ICAO provisions development in dynamically and fast-changing environment. Furthermore, we encourage ICAO to provide guidance regarding emergence in risks and to collaborate with RSOOs in order to raise awareness on these issues and related safety aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to all. We strongly support the Working Paper 254 from Japan and share their views on the legal challenges facing this kind of operations. Suborbital flights are part of the so-called new entrants with specific needs and business models, which create new legal, regulatory, and operational challenges, as well as opportunities to industry and economic growth. Their needs have to be accommodated and their operations integrated in a safe and orderly manner. These operations are by nature international and need adequate answer from UN agencies like ICAO and UNOSA. Even the industry is in the need to have some international framework because the investment for supporting the growth and the development and the safety associated with the operations are so big that international framework is the best answer to this. Therefore, we advocate for this clarification of the regulatory framework that would allow these operations to safely develop. At the same time, we advocate for such a framework to be flexible enough to accompany these new kind of operations and avoid undue constraints on technological innovation. Recommendations of Working Paper 254 are fully supported. And let me take a chance also to express support for the Working Paper 194 from IOPA. We think that the good experience we had in Europe differentiating the aeromedical requirements for pilots has proven to be a good support for the development of general aviation and to maintain at a level of safety for the cost that pilots have to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Italy. ICCAIA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The International Coordinating Council of Aerospace Industries Association supports the Working Paper 46 on emerging issues presented by European Union, European states, and Eurocontrol. This paper is very much in line with ICCAIA view that ICAO should proactively deal with new technologies and emerging issues in aviation through a performance-based approach. The pace of innovation in aviation is accelerating. A holistic and performance-based approach is therefore essential as highlighted in this Working Paper 46. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ICCAIA. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United Kingdom strongly supports Working Paper 194 presented by the International Council of Aircraft Owner and Pilot Associations. The UK welcomes all progress towards a more liberal approach to medical standards for light aircraft pilots. We have had an extremely positive experience from implementing more liberal standards through the European Aviation Safety Agency's Light Aircraft Pilot's Licence, and for those aircraft regulated nationally in the United Kingdom, a simple medical declaration. With these standards in place, we have seen many pilots return to flying. Others have been able to continue flying since we took this path. And more significantly, we have seen no degradation in aviation safety. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom. I now invite Denmark to take the floor. Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also welcome the initiative presented by IOPA in Work Paper 194. As mentioned by both Italy and UK, it is important to support the general aviation community with the best possibilities to develop easy access to recreational flying. As the Working Paper 94 points out, There are several national and regional approaches to the level of medical standards that are required in connection with light aircraft pilot licenses. We support the recommendations in the paper and endorse the development of ICAO provisions to set a harmonized set of global medical requirements for these type of light recreational flying licenses. It is, however, important that any new ICAO provisions strike an acceptable balance between enabling access to flying light aircraft and an acceptable level of safety. As mentioned by our colleagues in Europe, we have excellent experiences with the light aircraft pilot licenses and the very limited but proportional medical requirements associated with them, and we therefore encourage ICAO to look at the European approach when developing future ICAO provisions in this area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Denmark. IATA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IATA agrees with Working Paper 46 on emerging issues that collaboration between all relevant stakeholders, including industry, from the beginning is important. However, involving the, quote, general public may prove problematic. And IATA would also like to note and agree with conclusion A that ICAO systematically collect information and not data from states. Thank you.
Thank you, IATA. People's Republic of China, you have the floor.
下面有请. Thank you, Mr. Chair. China supports 154. As to this UAS, our AG has conducted a lot of work in Asia-Pacific region. We also have our task team, and China is actively participated. In this September, we have a forum, and China supports that with the guidance of ICAO, the regions can actively work out to have their regional support. China also supports 254. We know this orbital operation is a challenge and opportunity for international aviation. So for this reason, ICAO cooperated with UNOOSA to establish Space Learning Group and organized many symposiums to promote this discussion. So China supports the report of this team can be submitted to the 40th Assembly so that oversight mechanism can be established. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I invite Switzerland to take the floor. Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Switzerland fully supports Venezuela's Working Paper 154, as it highlights the relevant aspects of developing guidance material to support safe operations, airpass operations, and to facilitate implementation through regional training activities required by states and regions. In this respect, we would like to draw the attention on the conference to the ongoing and important work of the Unmanned Aircraft System Advisory Group, the Airpass Panel, under the auspices of ICAO and other global joint initiatives, such as the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems, JAROS, that develop relevant requirements in this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Colombia wishes to support Working Paper 46 from the European Union, and particularly, especially 154 from Venezuela and the SAM region, of which we're a part, of course. And we were very interested in the document 194 from IOPA to facilitate and harmonize certain requirements that would be clear and uniform on the medical standards for private and general aviation pilots. This is an urgent matter in many cases. Often these standards are very costly and very restrictive in several member states. We recognize the results of measures such as those that have been undertaken in Europe and in the United States, where they've been able to harmonize this need for the general aviation sector and reconcile that with the safety requirements. And now it's much less demanding, but at the same time, there has been no sacrifice made in terms of safety. It's very, very important to promote this. We need to continue to incentivizing the existence of general aviation. It's supremely important in countries such as our member state, where we have infrastructure issues because of the geographical constraints of our country, and it's only with general aviation that we can reach all parts of our country. We totally agree with the comments, or rather the concepts, laid out by the United Kingdom, and we wish to express our total support for all of the recommendations contained in this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. AFCAC, you have the floor.
AFCAC supports Working Paper 46 and its recommendations. We further support Working Paper 294 presented by South Africa, calling for ICAO to expand the current GSI courses. In that regard, AFCAC further recommends that current GSI courses be reviewed to incorporate Annex 19 provisions, that is, include evaluation and approval of operators' safety management systems and new imaging safety issues discussed in Working Paper 46. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AFCAC. Republic of Korea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Republic of Korea supports Working Paper 46, represented by the European Union, inviting ICAO for the leadership to further develop the management of emerging issues and risk coming from new technology in product and operations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. And I invite South Africa to take the floor. South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. South Africa support Working Paper 194 as presented by IAOPA. If indeed it's our intention to see the increase that we envisage with regards to the growth of aviation, the initiative taken by IAOPA in this regard is actually quite welcoming. And this also is in line with ICAO's NGAP program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Germany aligns itself with the delegations of Denmark, the UK, Italy, and also Colombia, and we support Working Paper 194. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. The turn of United States to take the floor. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As described in our support for Working Paper 12, we also support Working Paper 46, emerging issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, United States. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Netherlands would also took note of Working Paper 194 presented by International AOPA. And we think it's good to look around for alternatives in an active way. The Netherlands are nevertheless happy with the present situation with the light aircraft pilot licensing requirement in Europe. And therefore we consider that a good balance between the costs and the safety benefits. And therefore we fully support the remarks as already have been made by Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Netherlands. I'll invite France to take the floor. France.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. On Working Paper 194 from the IAOPA, we support the put forward by ICAO in terms of medical standards for light aircraft pilots. We need to strike the right balance between medical standards that are adapted to practices and risks related to light aircraft, and at the same time we need to retain our competencies in terms of medical aviation matters. Thank you.
Thank you, France. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela supports Working Paper 46. It's a very interesting concept and approach to deal with the management of these emerging issues, and we want to guarantee that we can treat all of this in our operations and models. We also support the paper presented by South Africa 294. It's very important, this aspect that's been raised. But when we're talking about new required competencies, then we have to ensure that inspectors have to be part of our overall state safety program. Thank you.
Thank you, Venezuela. Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, ICAO's main objectives are, of course, to ensure safety and safety oversight, and also deal with the challenges and come up with practical solutions to improve safety today. And given the current economic situation for air transport and air navigation, we can see that there's exponential growth. It is necessary to focus all of our efforts on standardization of the procedures and the oversight tools in a proactive way, having good governance, and ensure that we always manage the manage all of the requirements and bear in mind the human factor. And for commercial transport and for business aviation specifically, we also have to have the recycling of parts so that we can have the acceptable level of safety performance and environmental protection. We want to respect the sovereignty of member states in respect of the Chicago Convention, so we can support what has been put forward in Working Paper 46. Thank you.
Thank you, Morocco. I'll invite Mexico to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be very brief. I'd just like to support Working Paper 194 from IAOPA. This is a very important subject. We're talking about light aircraft pilots and the medical standards for these pilots. And as a member of LACAC, I very much want to support the Working Paper from Venezuela. That's very important, in particular for the South American region states. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mexico. Ecuador, you have the floor.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you. Ecuador supports Working Paper 154 from Venezuela, reinforcing the regulation that can be set up in each member state for unmanned aircraft systems and the overall safety context. We also support Working Paper 46 presented by Austria and the countries of the EU and ICAO and Eurocontrol. And Chairman, we also support 194 from IOPA as well as 294 from South Africa. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ecuador. I'll invite Cuba to take the floor. Cuba.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Cuba supports the Working Paper presented by Venezuela. This will certainly facilitate everything related to UAS and their operations, and also guarantee better safety throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Cuba. Philippines, it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philippines supports the Working Paper 294 as presented by South Africa to ensure competency of safety oversight inspectors. And Philippines also like supports working paper 154 as presented by Venezuela. Likewise, working paper 194, new medical standard for light aircraft pilots as presented by IOPA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Philippines. I'll give the floor to Captain Miguel Marin of the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chairman. Before the introduction or the comments from the Secretariat, I'd like just to take the opportunity and introduce two more members of the Secretariat that are here with us. Catalin Popa, could you please stand up for a minute? He's our technical specialist in training and licensing standards. And Frederic Malud, technical officer in remote pilot aircraft systems. And Frederic, do you want to take us through our comments to working paper 154, please?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a word of clarification with respect to working paper 154. First, the committee may wish to note that ICAO activities for the development of RPAS-related SARPs, PANs, and guidance material, as well as training activities to support their implementation, are already carried out by ICAO. And the committee may also wish to note that the matters that are addressed in this working paper 154 will be further considered next week in agenda item 5.3. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Frederick. Will the Secretariat give further clarifications? You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of paper 194, medical requirements for light aircraft, we do welcome the positive experiences that some of the states have mentioned here, because we have also had some negative experiences. So we would like to ask these states to please share their information, share their data with us, because we would like this to be a proper data-driven regulation or proposal that we need to look at. It will be very important, especially in view of the fact of balancing the cost versus aviation safety. We do not have sufficient data at present available within the ICAO Secretariat to determine that. However, we do welcome all of your data. Then in terms of the harmonization, there is at the moment 7 or 8 different states that we're aware that have different systems in operation, which varies from self-declaration to using a driver's license to using a general practitioner's medical examination. So we would like to harmonize that processes as well, because that would build towards our objective of ensuring a safe aviation. Part of that, of course, will then be to define exactly what we mean when we talk about light aircraft, because there are different types of aircraft, different weights. I mean, you guys know all of that. And then how we are going to implement that, because it will not only have an impact on the medical requirements, but also on different operational areas, on, for example, the age 60 legislation, also on other areas that I'm sure the operations people will be able to tell you more about. So it's much wider than just the medical requirements that we're looking at. And lastly, which is very important as well, aviation medicine is a specialized area. It's a specialized specialty recognized by various countries. So for us to embark on such an adventure, if I can call it that, is we would need to have proper education, proper guidance material, because people need to be aware what the limitations are of the human body, what the limitations are physiologically. So it will involve a lot of educational and guidance material as well. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. Miguel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to Working Paper 294 and the GSI courses for all USOP audit areas, we wish to inform the committee that, based on the resources available, ICAO has been making progress in this area. And of course, you know that we work with donor states to progress these courses. Right now in the works, we have the Aerodromes and Ground Aids course being developed by, in coordination with the Air Navigation Bureau, the Global Aviation Training Office, as well as an ANS GSI course. Those are courses, as you're used to the other GSI courses. But in addition to that, the GAT office has also created courses, either online or presential, or presence for safety management, the safety management practitioners course. And we also have the senior and middle managers course. So we are, we take into account the recommendations of Working Paper 154, and trust us that we're doing all that we can to do it with the resources that we have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Marcus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Concerning the paper from presented by Japan outlining the need for a regulatory framework for suborbital flights, the committee may wish to note that the issue of commercial space will be more thoroughly considered next week under agenda item 5.5. And also, the committee wish to note that the work related to commercial space in ICAO will be considered through the existing procedure for adding work to our air navigation work program as established by the Air Navigation Commission. So there is a procedure, and the Air Navigation Commission will be considering this in the upcoming sessions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Marcus, for the clarification, and thanks to all the Secretariat team members for their clarification of the various issues raised. So we can conclude on our discussion on sub-item 8.2, emerging safety issues. The committee agreed to the need to develop mechanisms for managing emerging safety issues as detailed in the Secretariat Working Paper 12. 2, it was agreed that a framework for suborbital flights will be initiated through the procedure for adding work to the Air Navigation Work Program as established by the Air Navigation Commission. 3, it was acknowledged that ICAO's ongoing activities for the development of RPAS-related SAPs, procedures for air navigation services, PANS, and guidance material, as well as related training activities, are beneficial to states and regions. 4, the committee noted the Global Safety Inspector, GSI, courses under development in ICAO and supported the need for GSI courses for all USOP areas. And Jordan offered to share their experiences in that regard. 5, it was agreed that the Council consider developing a new medical standard for pilots flying light aircraft, taking into account resources and budgetary implications. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the consideration of agenda item 8 and to the end of the consideration of all the working papers. You've worked so hard. We've worked within time. We've saved a little time for ourselves, and we have to find ways to use this time. It's not yet 5. Okay, so I will soon hand over to Secretariat for any administrative announcements. But remember to download the documents we projected, the safety report and the Global Runway Safety Report. They are for free and they contain very, very useful information. I mean, you all agree with me that runway safety is among the high risk categories, and it is important for all states to take the runway safety action plan very, very seriously. And the safety report is also important. It gives you a bird's eye view of safety management and performance of safety in general. There are lots of safety trend analysis, statistics, which equips us as safety managers to effectively focus on the high-risk areas. So these are very, very vital documents. ICAO is very, very kind in providing this very crucial information to all of us. And let's take advantage of the availability of these documents and download them. I have United States requesting for the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to make a motion to the Assembly to begin the review of the reports at this time.
I'll give the floor to Secretariat.
Good afternoon. Unfortunately, we don't have all the reports ready, as I said, and in fact, we need to let time for consultation and interpretation in all languages. So our proposal, in fact, is to start tomorrow 11 to be here to attend the lunch, the coffee break sponsored by Qatar, and at 11:30 to start discussing the reports, draft reports, in order to let enough time for everyone to read the papers and make sure that everyone will be in agreement with what we propose, and to make sure that we capture all the elements that were expressed during the meeting. So unfortunately, it's a little bit difficult for us to do it, and our proposal is to have it like that. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for the clarification. I hope the United States and other states here understand the constraints. We need to have the draft reports translated into all the working languages. I mean, no language left behind policy. And it takes time. It takes time to do the translation. And like I said this morning, some of the draft reports have already been published, so we can start reviewing these reports. WP 306 on 6.1, 307 on 6.2, 308 on 6.3 are already published. By tonight, the reports on agenda items 7 and 8 will be ready. Do spend time, review them. Then tomorrow at 11, we'll start with coffee, which is sponsored by Qatar. Then we go into the review of the draft reports. And I will also crave your indulgence that we make all our contributions to the review of the draft report tomorrow. After we finish the review, it will be taken to the plenary on Friday, next Friday, for adoption. And although it's not against the rule for a Committee B member to, ask for an amendment to the draft report, it's not very appropriate. It's best we give all our inputs to the draft report tomorrow, so that next Friday at the plenary, hopefully to be smooth sailing. So I'll crave your indulgence. Read the draft reports thoroughly and give your inputs tomorrow for the Secretariat to incorporate your suggestions as appropriate. On this note, I'll hand over to the Secretariat if they have any administrative announcements.
No, just to thank you all for the great amount of work that we've done here, and to acknowledge that we've had a lot of discussion, which gave us the possibility to look further to improve our projects and initiatives, and to make sure that at the end we will have a robust product that we can put in front of the states during the assembly. Thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to see you all tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. We also wish to thank all of you for your active participation. It's been very, very wonderful. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for the tremendous inputs they've made to the success of this conference or this committee deliberations. I would like to thank also the interpreters. You've done a great, great job. Thank you very much. And it's not over yet. We have coffee at 3:30, sponsored by Bombardier. It's now 5 minutes to 3, but we'll adjourn for today and reconvene again at 11 a.m. tomorrow, as was proposed by the Secretariat. Thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon, and all the best. Bye-bye.